Welcome to this video of Mark Brunner Coaching. In this video, we're going to look at how to deal with uncertainty when making decisions. Now, we know that nearly every decision that we make, every choice that we make, involves uncertainty. Why? Because when we make a decision, when we make a choice, what we're doing is we're committing to a particular way forward into the future. And no one can know the future for certain. We also know that uncertainty comes in degrees. There will be less uncertainty, for example, about the weather in Los Angeles on April 1st, than there will be about the weather in London at the same time. There's much to be said about uncertainty and its role in decision-making, so I'm going to break this down into a series of videos. In this first one, we're going to look at how uncertainty features in decision-making. In the next video, we're going to look at different types of uncertainty. And then I'll also be making a video on how to distinguish uncertainty from insecurity. And that's a difference that's actually more important than you may think. So, we all know that uncertainty is a big deal in decision-making. But why and how exactly? To answer that question, we need to look at the components of a decision. So every decision that we make has three fundamental components. Firstly, our objectives. Second, the options. And third, information. So let's take a look at each of those. The objectives. The objectives of a decision are basically your goals. What is important to you? What is it that you're hoping to achieve? Why are you bothering to make a decision in the first place? Yeah. The options, well, the options are the choices, the different alternatives, the different routes you can take, different actions you can commit to, different paths into the future. And information is information how each of these options relate back to your objectives. So how well each of the options serves your objectives. And it's here where uncertainty comes in because, as I said at the beginning, every decision involves a commitment to one option over another, and that commitment takes you forward into the future, but we don't know the future for certain, and so we cannot ever know for sure how each of the options meets our objectives. So what we do to deal with this uncertainty is that we look at information from the past, information that we have at our fingertips to make our best prediction of the future. But what kind of information? And that is really the nub of uncertainty. So when we're talking about information here, what we mean is information about possible states of the world and how they combine with our options. Now, what does that mean? States of the world simply means different ways how the world could be. Of course, as relevant to the decision that we are contemplating. So let's consider this in an example. Let's take the example of deciding whether or not to have a barbecue or to cook inside. Yeah, so this is a decision that people living in Britain face often in the summer because the weather is not quite so reliable as perhaps in other parts of the world. So our objectives when we're thinking about this are primarily to have a nice meal, good food, perhaps to enjoy the company of friends, and of course to make the best of the weather and overall to have a relaxing time. In our very simplified choice scenario, we only have two options, either to cook outside, to have the barbecue, or to set up for a meal and cooking inside. Okay, now we come to the relevant states of the world here. Again, to keep this very simple, we will only consider two states of the world that are relevant, and they're the states of the weather, namely whether it is going to rain or whether it is going to be sunny. Notice, and that's really important, that these different possible states of the world, the weather, are completely outside of your control. There is nothing you can do to influence the weather. And we cannot be certain about it. But what we can do is we can acquire information about it. For example, we can look at the weather forecast, or we can just go outside and look at the sky and see whether it looks like it might rain later on. That will give us some indication of the likelihood of rain versus sunshine. So in our simplified toy scenario, we have two possible states of the world, rain and sunshine. And they relate back to our decision because our two options, to set up barbecue, cooking outside, or set up for a meal inside, will have different outcomes depending on those states. So I think it's fairly obvious that the best outcome we can have is that it is a sunny day and we have set up for the barbecue outside. Here, we are in the best place to meet all our objectives because we will have yummy food cooked on the barbecue, we will be making the most of the weather, and we'll be having a fun and relaxing time. The worst outcome is that we have set up the barbecue and it starts raining. Then our food will be spoiled, we have to scramble to get back inside before we get completely drenched. It's going to be stressful, we're going to be wet and miserable, and then we have to cook some alternative meal. Now, if it's going to be a rainy day and we prepared for it and we have set up for our meal inside, that's an okay outcome. It's not as good as having a barbecue in the sun, but at least we're dry, we're prepared, we get to eat, and we can be relaxed because we don't have to scramble back inside. There's a fourth outcome, of course, and that's we've set up for cooking inside and it turns out to be a sunny day after all. Well, how does that serve our options? Well, yes, we will get to eat, and yes, we're dry and we're not stressed because we don't have to scramble back inside, but there's probably also going to be some regret. Damn, we could have had the barbecue after all. So in this little example, we have two options. What we can do, set up for the barbecue outside or set up for cooking inside, and two relevant states of the world, sunshine and rain. And those combine to four different potential outcomes. And we have information via the weather forecast about the probability of each of those two relevant states of the world. And we also have information about how well each of these outcomes serves our objectives. So what we can learn from this example is that whenever we encounter uncertainty in decision-making, it is uncertainty about future states of the world, and we cannot know for certain how things will turn out. What's important to understand is that this uncertainty is totally outside of our control. The best we can do is to make an educated guess to get the most accurate understanding of how likely different states of the world will be. If we have that, and we are clear on how our different options will serve our objectives depending on possible future states of the world, then we're in a great position to make a good decision. There will be formal ways we can do that in more complicated scenarios where there's more than two options and more than two states of the world, but most decisions that we're facing in a day-to-day situation are probably fairly simple. And so the key thing is to have clarity on what the role is of uncertainty. The uncertainty here is about the weather, and what we can work out ourselves. We can work out ourselves how each of the different outcomes serves our objectives. Okay, that's enough for today. Tune in for the next video where we will take a look at different types of uncertainty and how to approach them. In the meantime, head over to my website www.markbühner.com where you can find a longer blog post that explains approaches to uncertainty in more detail. I will put the link for that into the comments. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.